relationships are scalable. If marketing's job is to build relationships at scale, and if relationships are built through conversation, how can marketing be used to drive conversation? We didn't really define relationships. The channels via which relationships are built have changed, and we're now, technology is allowing us to build relationships at scale on a personal level. Leverage relationships to drive growth in your organization. If you shift the focus to relationships instead of revenue, magic things happen. Relationships are at the core because they help you build affinity and trust. That's how relationships are built. All right, everybody, welcome back to Relationship-Led Growth Live. We've been on a bit of a hiatus over the holidays and getting into January, but we are back, and we're kicking things off with a really fun conversation, a special one. We got our friend Gary Braun, the co-founder of Pivotal Advisors, here with us, because we're going to be talking business development today. As for those of you who don't know me, Mike Grimberg, CEO of Proof Point Marketing. We got Joseph Lewin here, who is our Director of Growth as well. And the three of us are going to be mixing it up today, again, talking about business development. And, Joseph and I pretty consistently talk about how, go to market for professional services is different than other industries. Gary has talked about it, how from a business development perspective, I've heard him and I have had those conversations, and we now finally have some data that supports this, by the way. And that's the impetus for this conversation. There was a recent HBR article that came out, and Joseph and I posted a little bit about it. Gary and I talked about it, and we figured it would be really good to dive into more detail on some of these things and provide more insight from our experience. And that's what we're going to do here today. So, Joseph, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely looking forward to this conversation, especially coming off of, I was able to interview Matt Dixon, one of the co-authors of the article, and his episode just came out. Not to do a self-promotional plug here, but we just had this episode of our show Outbound come out yesterday with Matt Dixon. So if you find this content interesting, I really deep dive with him on the research and kind of go deeper, even than they went in the article in that episode. But essentially, Matt Dixon and his firm, DCM Insights, did a study of 1,800 partners. And what they found was that they consistently fell into these 5 overarching profiles. Now, it's not a personality test. So these profiles aren't set in stone, but based on the tendencies of the different partners at these professional services firms, they tended to lean really heavily into one of the 5 profiles. And what they found is that 78% of partners fell into 4 out of the 5 profiles. And all 4 of those profiles are associated with negative performance. In other words, the stronger they went into those profiles, or the stronger tendencies they had, the worse that they did. And there was only one profile, spoiler alert, the activator profile, that's associated with positive performance. And as partners lean heavier into the particular traits of an activator, they were able to boost their performance by as much as 32% on an individual level. So some really interesting insights, and goes along with a lot of the things that we talk about here.
So the interesting thing for me, and Gary, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Joseph, you went into it with Matt on during the interview that you had, but for those who don't know, Matt Dixon's I can't remember, is he the sole author or the co-author of the Challenger?
Co-author. Yeah, the Challenger,
right? And one of the things they discovered is that's literally the worst profile for business development professional services, which I found really fascinating because my tendency is to literally challenge everybody about everything. And I'm a questioner. If anybody knows the Gretchen Rubin thing, I'm a questioner by nature. And I like to have debates and things like that. And that is how I started out when, we were building Proofpoint and whatnot. I've gotten better at it, I would say. But Gary, I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, what have you seen as it pertains to that? Like, why? Or maybe let me ask you a different question. Why do you think that the challenger persona, if you will, or the profile, doesn't work in the for professional services?
Well, I'm going to take a big step back and say this is a problem I have seen going on for several years. Is that a lot of the quote rainmakers and a lot of these organizations are very deeply concerned right now because a lot of them are approaching retirement age and they're looking to get out, but they want their firm to continue going. And who's going to pick up the reins and go to the next? Who's going to keep their legacy going? And they're trying all these different things to try to keep it going. So that's kind of the problem I think that we're talking about a little bit today. The challenger thing, the debater, if you will. This is where the art and the science come in. Nobody wants to be told that they're wrong. Nobody wants to be told that you're doing it wrong. It's like calling somebody's baby ugly. You don't want to do that. But if you can go and present, here's what other people do, here's what the data says, hey, I've seen this work at other firms similar to you, here's an option for you, and they make it their idea, then all of a sudden you're still debating, you're still challenging, you're still throwing ideas out there, but you're doing it in a much more tactful, soft way, and people seem to accept that much better.
Yeah, actually, the thing you brought up about a lot of these rainmakers retiring. I mean, we definitely see that. I mean, I literally just had a conversation with a CEO a couple of days ago that was, well, not directly about that. That's what they were referencing is,
sure,
hey, like, and they were kind of in this point where they're talking about, well, the founders have moved out of being these rainmakers, but we haven't had somebody that can pick up. Our relationships are no longer current. What the hell do we do? So there's that too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're scared to death, and they've tried all different types of things. And the most difficult part, I think, is a lot of these guys and gals don't know what it is that they do that's made them successful. They've just been doing it for years and years and developed all these relationships. And they might fall into your confident category from the HBR article, but they've just built this up and now they just wait for the phone to ring. Well, if I'm a newbie and now I'm expected to come in and generate business, I don't have that same network. So how do I transfer that to somebody else? That's the real dilemma that they're facing.
Yeah, Gary, I think that's a really key point, because I'm in the bracket where some of my friends and peers are kind of stepping into, even partner roles or things like that. And they're being asked to go bring in the bacon, and they're going, I don't know how to do that. And then they try to do what the partners are telling them to do, and it's not working. And then the other partners get frustrated, and they go, well, hey, if you want to really be successful, you got to now go out and do cold outreach, which is something that the senior people never did. And
Right.
So then they're asking them to do something that they've never done before, and then get frustrated when it's not working. And it's like, it really puts the younger folks in a bad position.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, I think the rainmakers who've been doing this for a long time did do a lot of cold outreach in the early parts of their career. They had to do something to get business. They got word of mouth going. They did all kinds of things. So it's just been years, and they had to dust. They don't even dust off those skills anymore. Now they just wait for it to come in. But what you said is, you asked these people to go start generating business. A lot of them went to school to be a CPA or an architect or a digital marketer or a civil engineer, or they didn't go to school to learn how to go sell stuff. And they got all this head trash going on about, I don't want to be a slimy salesperson. So even if I know how to do it, I got to get out of my own head about this is not a bad thing to be doing. This is part of business. This is part of life. So they're dealing with a couple different things.
And actually, just to kind of pull from the conversation from the conversation with Matt, something that he said that was kind of hilarious is he wrote the Challenger sale, and he said his epiphany moment for realizing that professional services is different was that he was asked to come to this to do a speaking engagement at a large firm, and he's on stage, and 45 minutes into the hour presentation, one of the senior partners who had invited him to come stands up and goes, "Hey, we don't do sales here. You keep using the word sales." And he's kind of like, the book's called The Challenger Sale, so not sure what you expected. And then, basically he realized that professional services people do have exactly what you're saying. They like to talk about business development and, kind of try to stay away from the word sales as much as possible.
Oh, Joseph, I've been told that so many times when going into one of these professional service areas is you can't say the word sales here. It's kind of a bad word. You have to use BD or business development. I had one, she did very high level tax stuff, international tax stuff. And they're very specialized. And she says, I just hate it. I force myself to make one cold call per week. And I feel dirty when I do it. And I'm like, okay, well, let's get over this. So I said, do people out there do what you do well, or do they need help? They need help. And if you ask them, do you do these types of things? And are you doing this right? Would they acknowledge that they're not very good at it? Yes. And could you show them a better way to do it? Yes. Would they pay you for that? Yes. I go, congratulations, you're in sales. They're like, well, that's all it is. I'm like, yeah, you're solving a problem for them. But she had to get the head trash out that, sales is a slimy, bad thing. It's not. We're problem solvers. That's what we do.
Yeah, I think, and I wonder how much of it comes from some of the, playbooks, if you will. It's like, well, you do this and you do this and you do this. And because I'll give you an example. We were just evaluating several vendors, or I shouldn't call them vendors, but several consultant partners for something that we're going to be working on internally. And we evaluated like 5, and we chose one, and we're excited about it. But one of them was the like our potentially second choice, but the sales process was that it was just so pushy. They were doing the whole like fake sense of urgency. Oh, only 2 spots or only 1 spot left. I'm like, I don't care. Like, don't give me that. Like, if I'm going to be spending 70 grand or that's not the way you do that. You're not going to get me excited by that, or whatever thing. It was just things like that. And I wonder if those are the things that, when you look at the, like a managing partner at a 200 person firm, like that's probably what they're comparing to. Like, well, no, I don't want to do sales. Like, I don't sell, I consult.
Right. And who cares what you call it? Call it consulting, call it business development, call it, problem solving, whatever. I don't care. It's selling. I mean, it's uncovering a problem and providing a solution to that problem. That's selling.
So let's get into some details here that I think would be really interesting, especially Gary with you here to talk about. So now, why is business development professional services different? I think I'm curious on your thoughts, Gary, but in what we've seen is, number one, in a lot of these firms, and this is what is mentioned in this HBO article, is there is no formal business development function. It's these managing partners or practice leads that are doing sales as part of their work, which also includes managing people, managing projects, delivering the actual work, all this kind of stuff, account management, etc. And then on top of that, or with that, what you have is competing interest from getting new work versus meeting your billable target.
And 100
these
times
are the most expensive people on top of that. Usually they're the ones billing at $4.50 an hour or whatever it is.
Right. And I can promise you that, 99 times out of 100, they will place the billable work above the BD. So it always takes a backseat. That's just a fact of life.
I'm curious, with your experience, are there any other intricacies of professional services that make business development more challenging or different than in whatever product firms?
Yeah, it's not concrete. I mean, if I sold you a phone, you can look at the phone, you can compare it to other phones, you can look at features, you can get into. You're selling you. I mean, you're selling your team, or you're selling a project, and it's when people buy something, they need to know what they're getting. One of the you guys are in the same boat as I am, where you're selling professional services right now, and one of the big questions you get all the time is, what are the deliverables? People want something tangible. They want something that they can understand what they're buying, and it's harder to communicate with professional services. The other part that's really different is if I compared an Apple phone to a Samsung phone or a Droid, you can get into features and everything else. And when you're selling professional services, boy, do people have a hard time differentiating. They say things like, we have awesome customer service and we have really good people on our team. I'm like, you don't think your competitors are saying the exact same thing? So you have to be good at why you or your firm or your team is different or better or can help more than somebody else. And a lot of that is through everything that you always talk about, Mike. It's by developing the relationship, developing the trust, by proving it in some manner. So you're building that trust, and people buy from people they know and trust. And that's harder. People don't get that. They want to put it into your playbook, as you said earlier, and say, first you ask them this, then you ask them that. No, it's a relationship.
Yeah, the whole our people are the difference. Like I'd be a very rich person if I had $1 for every time somebody told me that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've helped a number of consulting firms, build out their strategic narratives. And one of the questions, like, hey, what makes you different? Oh, it's our people. Okay. How? Well, they have deep expertise. Okay. Who of your competitors is not saying the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like,
we have 275 years of combined expertise in XYZ area.
Okay. Same stuff, Joseph, all that. So I sat in front of an accounting firm once, pretty large accounting firm in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And they had 20 partners all in this room. And I said, what makes you different, to your point, Mike? And they started, well, we've been around since 1943. And I'm writing out this huge, giant whiteboard. Been around since 1943. We're good at tax. We're good at audit. Our people are certified in this. We do this. And they came up with this. There was 20 things on the board. And I said, okay, what I didn't tell you was last night I went to all your competitors' websites and I pulled off key phrases. And if they say the same thing, I'm going to cross it off. Is that fair? And well, yeah, that's fair. And then I pull up somebody, they've been around longer than you. They're good at tax. They're good at audit. They can do this. And I went through the whole thing and I got done. And there was one thing left. And it was, we have some niche around ESOP companies. And other people do ESOP. And I go, oh, tell me more about this. And they're like, ESOP is very different because you have to report differently and they're all kind of shareholders and you got to communicate differently. You got to do all this. I'm like, well, do other people do it? Yeah, but we do this and we have this process. I'm like, okay, cool. Newfound knowledge here. So now that we know that we're different here, what are you going to do with that? Well, we should call in all the ESOP companies. I'm like, well, yeah, okay, do that. And when you get in front of them, what are you going to say? We've been around since 1943 and we're good at tax and we're good at, I'm like, no. Now, how do we leverage that? So it's interesting. We get into these modes and we're not very good at differentiating. And that's really what people buy for.
Yep. No, it's similar. I like to do a similar exercise where I will pretty much take like screenshots of the websites. And then what I'll do is I'll switch logos and colors and I'll present it to the partners. It's amazing how many don't realize that the website's
right.
Like, oh yeah, this sounds like us. Like, nope, this is your top competitor's website. They're saying the exact same thing. That's why you don't recognize the difference.
Yep.
All right. So where I was going with this is, so we know it's different. And I feel like I've heard two schools of thought, which is, okay, and I've seen them executed as well, both well and poorly. And this is where I want to get into. It's either, okay, we can't have a formal BD function because this is complex, big ticket, enterprise level consulting, whether, they could be in biotech, they can be in digital transformation, whatever. And, business development people, they're too far away from the work. They can't do the consultative sale. Like we have to sell this ourselves. The people that do the work, they have to do the sales. On the other end, what I've heard and seen, it's, well, our managing directors and our practice leads, they don't know how to sell. They don't really want to sell. They don't really know how to do it. So, and they don't have the time because they're delivering work, which we talked about that big issue. So we're going to have a formal business development function. We're going to hire business development people. What's the right way?
I'm going to introduce a third. I think both of them can work, but I'm going to introduce a third one as well. So, not everybody's cut out to sell. So you can have somebody who is in your field, who is just an expert at whatever their trade is or whatever they do. That doesn't mean they can sell it. They can maybe support a sale, get brought in at some point in the sale, but that doesn't mean they're going to go out and proactively do stuff. So start by recognizing who on your team has the ability to do that and give them the skill set. And the skill set is not walk through a playbook and ask this question and that question. It's start by saying, what problems do we solve for people? Who has those problems? How do you get in front of them? I mean, let's just start that simple. And it can be through networking. It can be through events. It can be through marketing. It can be all different kinds of ways. But get the mindset of let's just figure out what problems we're solving for them and what impact can we have on them. Let's go find them. And start easy. And then you can take your directors and your people who want to become partners and whatnot, and just start there and get them out in the field, just asking some curious questions. That can work. Get them some structure around how do I ask the right questions to uncover whether they're a potential opportunity for me or not. I have seen a lot of firms recently go more towards hire somebody to go sell it, and that can work too. The problem I see is they hire somebody who came from sales. That's it. Okay, do I want a hunter? Do I want a farmer? Do I want somebody who's good at selling to the C-level or mid-level? Do I want somebody who's good at direct selling? Do they have to be good at generating leads, networking, and what? We don't get into any of those skill sets. They just said, well, hey, Joseph's been in sales for a long time, so he should be good. And we do not set this person up for success, and we don't onboard them well, and we don't do anything, and they fail, and they go, we'll never work. So I'll introduce the third option I teased you with a little bit. Was we did this with a architecture firm, and they had been through, 3, 4, 5 different BD people, and they all failed. And the guy told me straight to my face, can't do it. You need to be an architect to be able to sell architecture. And I challenged him a bit, and we talked about it. And I said, what if we just equip this person with, here's our target audience, go get in front of them somehow, networking, direct outreach, whatever, get in front of them and ask enough questions to tee up the opportunity, and then bring an architect to talk about the really smart stuff. That could work. We found a guy outsold every partner in the firm. He was out there and he did that. So I would say there's this hybrid thing. Just because you bring out a BD function doesn't mean that they need to do it from soup to nuts. They can do part of the process, figure out what they can do and how they can, fill the top of the funnel and maybe leverage other people on the team to get it done. I've seen that work probably better than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's sort of the similar model to like enterprise software sales, where they bring in a solutions engineer once you get into the nitty gritty. Right. And I've actually just spoke with a CEO of a management consulting firm maybe a couple of weeks ago. That's the direction they're going, because they, their directors and practice leads don't know how to sell. They're just not set up to do it. And part of it is also, I don't think they have incentives, but that's a whole separate thing. Like if the incentives aren't there, they have no reason to spend their time to do it. Right. Which is opposite. I was talking to another CEO last week, where they're a smaller firm, but they offer like fractional CFO services and things like that. And he talked about how, several, they do profit sharing. So that's obviously an incentive. But then on top of that, people who came in and said, hey, we have a network, we want to do this, they have a variable comp plan as part of their thing, right? So I think that's the other part of it is, I think if I remember right, you were when you and I were talking about some of the stuff, like incentives have to be there. Otherwise, you're not going to convince somebody that can be billable that they need to spend their time to, to do this work.
Well, right, and it's got to be meaningful. So a lot of firms that I see in professional services, they'll say, we all share in the bottom line, and the better the company does, the better.
Yeah.
Well, I can translate that in my head to I need to do more billable work.
Mhm.
And I can translate that however I want to. A lot of times partners are only paid, they get some base salary, but they're only paid on the bottom line. And nobody holds anybody accountable to doing any type of thing. And it's great. We roll out some process and plans and whatnot with like a CPA firm, for example. And all the lower level people are like, well, this is great, but none of the partners are going to do this. Who's going to hold them accountable? I'm like, make it public, man. Get their commitment, and then you put that scoreboard up in front of everybody and go, Joseph, you're a partner here, but you made 0 calls this month. I mean, really, what's the deal here? And when they get used to holding each other accountable, you make some progress.
Yep. Well, I mean, like even internally, we've started sharing some of our activity numbers, so that holds me and Joseph accountable for stuff that we need to be doing.
For sure. The other part I'll say too is we made a big shift in our firm when we started. So we started in 2008, and it was my brother and I and one employee. And it was kind of an eat what you kill, which is a lot of what these professional services firms are. You go out there, you find it, you work it. When that's done, you go find another one and you keep doing that. And what happens is you get a lot of this roller coaster effect where you're up and down and up and down. My brother and I one year made a conscious decision. Let's make a split. And I'm going to go do nothing but keep the top of the funnel full. That's my only job. Yeah, 90% of my job. He's going to do the opposite. He's just going to worry about let's deliver great work and build out our team to do that. We made a couple offering changes to simplify it. Excuse me. In 1 year, we grew 90%. Because we constantly had a full funnel. We evened out the ups and downs. He got better at building our team to deliver great. And when I was focused on nothing but BD, my BD got better. And I should be asking this. And boy, why wasn't I doing this every time? Because you're not in the flow. You're doing this as a part-time job. So personally, when we split it in half, man, it made a huge difference in our growth when we had somebody dedicated to the function.
So I'm curious, I can, Joseph and I can speak to from there's a marketing integration component that I think makes an alignment component that makes companies successful. But I'm curious from the other side of that coin, from a BD function specifically, what are the things that you think that you see make professional services sellers specifically successful?
I tell everybody who comes into our organization who's going to be in a BD, cold calling is probably the last thing you're going to do. It's still important to do some direct outreach, but there's a heck of a lot more important things. You have to find the ecosystems where your people live. Figure out how to penetrate that ecosystem through marketing, through showing up, going to events, whatever. You need to become a master networker. So who else in our world calls on the same ideal client profile? And how do we get tight with them? And by the way, when you get tight with them, I have seen so many crappy networking meetings in the Starbucks where we sit down and we go, hey, Joseph, what do you do? Okay, that's really cool. And here's what I do. And Joseph, if you hear of anybody, let me know. I'll do the same. Okay. 0 come out of those conversations. Absolutely 0.
Or you're forced to.
Forget
They're
about
like,
it as soon as you walk out of that Starbucks. Or as soon as your coffee's gone.
Or you have to give like three a week of introductions to different people to be part of the group, and then it gets really slimy because you're like,
and that's because people are thinking about this very transactionally. I'll give you one, and you give me one, and it's not about the relationship. Now, if I sat down with you, Joseph, and I said, we deal with a lot of companies where their revenue has tapered off. or their revenue growth has tapered off, they kind of flatten out. Here's some of the reasons that's happening. And it's because this and that and the other thing, and this is what we solve. And then maybe I tell you a story about something I solve, and you go, I know a company like that. That's way different. I go, and tell me don't tell me about what your product or service is. Tell me about what problems you solve, who has that problem, and how have you fixed it for others. That stuff retains. And then we don't end it by going, and if you think of somebody, you go, you know what, I'm looking for somebody to be in a regular networking group. We're going to get together once a month. We're going to share each other's experiences. And when you show up at each group, I want everybody to at least bring one name of somebody you're working on. And maybe they're a lead, maybe they're not, but I want to talk about what you did for them and why they brought you in and everything else. You get to understand people's businesses. And now when I'm in somewhere else and I go, oh boy, they're really having problems with, top of the funnel stuff, I should give them to Mike because Mike deals with that. But it's because I understand the problems we solve. I'm not going to sell Mike services, but I know what problems he solves and I just tee it up. That's when the selling gets good. That's what makes a difference between selling a product and selling a professional service. They have to be good at finding the ecosystems, being really good at networking, what we call give to gets. I give away so much stuff, guys. I give away a tool, a model, an article, or whatever else. Can they go execute it? Maybe. Most of the time, no. They're going to come back and ask for more. But you have to be really good at understanding what could they possibly use? What can I give them that can help them? And then they want you more because now you're a valued resource. But it's different. It's different than just pinging the phone or sending out a bunch of emails,
I think the magic word that you said that resonates with me, and I'm guessing Joseph, you too, is ecosystem, because we talk about that all the time. And that's, if I think about a lot of the things that we do, it's helping our clients penetrate and build those ecosystems from a top and middle of the funnel perspective, if we want to use the funnel analogy.
Yeah.
Right? How can we connect with the right people? How can we connect with the right groups? Because it's all about, I think the other important thing for professional services, it's building trust, right? Because I think the HBO article kind of talks about this a little bit. And I think, just maybe you talked about this with Matt, but the traditional way, it's, well, we're going to do great work. We're going to build that trust, and then they're going to refer us business, which that still exists to a certain extent, right? But the problem becomes that doesn't exist as much. So now you have to find ways to bring in net new business in a different way. But unless you figured out how to build that affinity and trust at scale somewhere, you're not going to do it, because you're not going to keep getting those referrals just because you used to. So it's about like you were talking about, like penetrating those ecosystems. I mean, the thing we're doing right now, right? It's we're starting to work together a little bit and whatnot, and we're doing this co-marketing thing. I'm going to come on one of your shows at some point later. It's these types of things, right? And this is an example of it. But it starts building trust, because we're having a conversation. Our audience gets to know you a little bit and can see, oh yeah, Gary really knows his stuff. Maybe I've got a problem with sales leadership or whatever it is, right? And now we've created this network effect through this.
And if people, we keep using the word ecosystem, if that's not clear to the people listening, I'll give you a great example. Like Vistage is a national CEO peer group organization. That's my target market. I mean, it's CEOs for small to mid-sized businesses. They all are part of Vistage or CEO Roundtable or Inner Circle or the Alternative Board or something like that. So I go to, like, we're in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. When we started the business, I went to every Vistage chair there was and said, here's the problems we solve. Does anybody in your group have problems like this? How about if I come to your group and give a free presentation? You don't need to pay me or anything. Talk about, here's some of the problems, a lot of the pitfalls people have. Here's some practical things you can do to address them. Give it away free. Now, next time when somebody in their group says, I got a problem, bing, I come to mind. And do that with everybody in the ecosystem. That's how we start building that. That's a lot different than making a cold call, I tell you.
100%. I mean, If I had to make cold calls, I don't think I'd be in business at this point. I would detest it. It's interesting you talk about giving stuff away for free, and I found that especially in management consulting, but I've seen it in some other technical consulting fields like med device engineering and things like that, where they struggle with making things public. They have no problem giving it away free in a one-on-one situation, like you and I are talking. One-on-one, like, hey, Mike, you should check out this tool. All right, cool. Thanks, Gary. Right. That they're generally fine with that. But when it comes to like posting it publicly on LinkedIn or doing or things like that, they're like, oh, well, what if somebody steals it? I don't know. Like, there's this weird thing. It's like, well, the solution I generally talk about is, well, talk about frameworks, because frameworks help with mindset. That's not enough to execute. But it gets them ready for when, like, oh yeah, I've got this mindset, I'm ready to go. They're going to reach out to you.
It's funny. We do a lot of events. We used to do them quarterly. Sometimes we do them monthly or bi-monthly. But you just made me think of, there was one company and they would have the owner and the CFO show up at every one of our events. They're almost like Pivotal Advisors groupies. And it was funny. I could almost count on them. I knew exactly where they were going to sit and everything else. And one time, one of the guys comes up afterwards. He goes, I can't believe how much stuff you guys give away for free. And there's those people who they're going to take it and they're going to run with it. The majority of people don't know how to execute. Tell you what, if I could read a book or watch a video and know how to execute, I would be on the PGA Tour right now. It ain't going to happen. You need somebody to help you implement it and coach you and make you better at it and whatnot. And that's where we come in. I can give you, here's what a great sales process looks like. Can you mimic it? Yeah. Does that mean your sales team's going to do great with it? No. That's where you're going to need help. And that's where we come in. So I agree with you. Give them a framework, give them a tool, give them something. As long as it's relevant and you're being helpful and you're doing it with the intent to be helpful, they appreciate it. And then you're going to be the first one they come back to when they need help.
Yeah, I think there's something really interesting about what you just said. I mean, for one, if somebody can take your process and just go implement it, you probably don't have a differentiated enough
Really well said. Well said.
So, you got to figure that part out. Maybe sidebar conversation. But number two is what I'm landing on more and more. This kind of came out of, I was in more of the manufacturing space before. So a lot of digital transformation talk is kind of in that world. And what it really comes down to is digital transformation isn't about the tools or the technology. It's about people. And ultimately, digital transformation is people transformation. And it's a people challenge and process. And I think that same thing applies in almost any kind of professional services. If you're going to come in and you're going to bring something that's going to change the organization and solve a real, like, critical business problem for them, which is when you're going to actually make money in professional services, it becomes as much about your firm's ability to manage change in that other organization and be able to get them to hold themselves accountable, or, get buy-in from the right stakeholders, bring enough awareness to a problem so that the internal champion can go sell that internally. And if you can't do that, then, you're probably not going to win. So figuring out how to give away something that highlights the problem enough for your team to come in and say, hey, we can help you actually get your team on board and give you the tools you need to be successful at implementing it. To your point, I think that's the differentiator.
Man, that was a gem. That was beautifully said. I couldn't agree with you more. And by the way, people don't want to say that they're sellers. People sell every day. You are selling concepts internally every day. When you want to get your opinion heard, you are selling. And it is just something everybody does every day. But I agree with you 100%. I think when anybody buys anything, and it can be physical dollars or I'm buying into a concept or anything, they make two decisions. And the first decision is, do I need to do anything differently than I'm doing it today? That's number one. And if you can't get number one, that one settled, you're never going to get to number two. And if you get them to say, you know what, maybe I'm not awesome at this. Maybe there is a better way to do this. Maybe there's a different way of thinking about this. If you can get them past that, then decision number two is, And are you the right guy or the right person to solve this problem for me? But I think too many people go in with decision 2 first, and then this is why we're great and why you should work with us and blah, blah, blah. And we never get them past the, why should I do anything differently at all? Do I even have a problem? And that's again, a fundamental thing that some people just do intuitively, but that's selling. That's exactly what selling is.
I mean, I can't tell you how many sales decks from consulting firms I see and I review in the beginning of an engagement, and it starts with, well, let me just vomit on you everything about us. We're in 25 countries. We've got 150 employees. We've worked with 155 clients. Yeah, just blah, 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 blah. And here's our services, blah, blah, whatever. And then maybe like on slide 25, they get to, so here's the core problem that you probably have. By then, I'm either asleep or I've left the room.
Right.
Like, I don't care about you.
Right.
At this point, like not in a discovery conversation, like, and maybe if like you were referred to my most trusted peer, and even then, at some point, I'm just going, hey, can we get to the point here? Like, what? I've got this issue. How are you going to help me?
Mike, that reminds me of, we were evaluating a vendor for a client of ours.
Yeah.
And oh man, it was so painful. I went through like 3 calls explaining exactly what we needed. And the guy's like, yes, we can do that. You know, he even showed me on like a base amount of data. Yes, absolutely. We can do that for you. So then I get Mike on the phone, I get our client, and then I get our client to bring somebody on the phone that he was really reluctant to bring on. They spent an hour going through just their straight pitch deck before they got to the actual point. And we kept being like, hey, can you just show us the point? And they're trying to like upsell us on something we haven't even bought yet. Yeah, I think he went like 20 minutes over. And then it turned out that they didn't actually have the data that he had said that they had. And it was like, oh my gosh, you made me look really bad. And now I actively am going to try to not work with you whenever I can.
You know, it's interesting if we bring this back to this whole rainmaker concept with the HBR article and everything else. The people who have been doing this for a long time, they do it very intuitively. They read the room. They understand when I should talk about what we do, when I should ask more questions. They're learners. They're inquisitive. They're curious. They just do that. And because of that, they're not challenging. They're not debating everything else. They're just really curious, and they're learners, and they're pulling stuff out of people until people go, you know what? I really should look at whatever I'm doing differently. And they go, great. And now they know, mentally shift. Let's go into decision number 2 and talk to them about what we do. The hard part is these people don't even know what they do. They don't know how to take that out of their head and teach somebody else how to do that. I sat in front of a VP of sales once. He was a player coach, Josh. He had 5 people on his team, and he was also a seller. And he carried 60% of the revenue for his team. He's the big hitter, right? And I sat down and I go, Josh, you've been super successful. So tell me exactly how do you do that? What do you do? Walk me through your process. And he goes, cool. And he was just locked up for like 30 seconds. Then he comes back and goes, you know, Gary, it's all kind of a blur. I'm like, what? He goes, it's a blur. You know, I go in there, I ask a couple of questions, and then based on the answer, I ask a few more questions. And before you know it, I'm proposing something and I sell it. And I'm like, and you're the guy teaching everybody. You know, the hard part is to pull out of their heads what questions you ask. Why are you asking those questions? What are you trying to get at? How do you set up your differentiators? When do you do that? Who do you do that? They don't know. And that's, you know, that's the hard part. That's why I feel
like you're speaking to me, Gary, because that's what I'm
Well, it's a common problem, and it's there's a lot of stuff you can't teach. You have to hire people who are just curious, inquisitive learners, and they're constantly digging. I tell people all the time, act like a little kid. You know, you get a little kid and you'll say, well, this is what we do. And they go, why? Well, because this. Well, why? Because this. Why? Be a little kid sometimes. You just ask and ask and ask. But that's hard for people to understand how to do it.
I love the word curious, and we have that in our culture book as part of our culture book. But as it relates to business development, I've actually thought about like renaming our stage of discovery conversation to curiosity conversation, because that's really what it is. Like, yes, we're discovering about the prospective client, but it's actually, we are like, the goal is to be curious, because that's how you are able to uncover it. I think that's a really important thing. And I think, like, there's some things that can be taught and there's some things that are just can't. Can you teach somebody to be curious?
I don't. I think you can get them better at it. Not everybody's going to do that. They have in their head where they want to go. I was doing a training with a bunch of sellers recently, and I said, "What if?" This is not going to be rocket science, but I said, "What if you set up the meeting with them and say, you know what? I'm not here to sell anything to you today. I don't even know if we're a good fit for you today. My job today is to learn as much as I can about you and answer questions for you so we can determine whether we're a fit for each other. And then if that works, then we'll go to the next step and I'll show you what we do. Does that sound good?" And they're like, "You're not selling anything? You don't present it?" I'm like, "No, this is what we call discovery," or like you just got like the curiosity thing. And it changed their mindset. And it kind of took the pressure off them about, I don't have to present everything in a certain way. I'm like, just go be curious, ask it. And here's the 5 different areas you need to go learn as much as you can about, and gave them a framework, and they went nuts and they got a lot better. But their natural tendency is, it's like a little kid in school. I know the answer to that one. If I'm talking to you, Mike, and go, well, I'm kind of struggling with this, rather than ask 5 more questions and then move to the next topic and ask more questions, I'm like, I know the answer to that. Here's what you could do, Mike. And I jump right into sales mode. And
that kind of goes back. That kind of goes back to those 5 profiles, because for me personally, when I was running my own thing for a little while, and I think I fell into kind of flip-flopping between the expert and the realist. And, it's basically the person who is exactly that. You hear a couple questions, your mind automatically fires and you go, oh, I know how to solve that problem. And then you get out a whiteboard and you draw out this complex map and you're like, I got you. And then you think you're going to get the sale. And I never got those sales. And then the other one is the realist, where you're like, okay, everybody else in the industry overpromises and underdelivers. So I'm going to be very realistic about what's possible and what's not. And I never got those sales either. And it's this struggle between like them trusting that you know what you're talking about without getting so far in the weeds that they're bored. And they're like, well, that's why I would hire somebody. And, they're thinking of every meeting they're going to have with you looking like that whiteboard. And they're like, bored. But just to kind of tie it together, because we're getting towards the end here, we've talked a lot about why professional services is different. We've kind of alluded to some of the things that people do differently, but I think it'd be helpful to spend a couple minutes diving into, what are some of the practical things that we've seen. And I mean, I heard you, Gary, say quite a few of these things, and I've seen this, but kind of just tying it back to the article, a lot of the things that they saw with the activator profile were they're proactive. So they're actually putting time on their calendar, typically every day, but at least, once or twice a week, where they have time that is like your workout time. If you don't get to it in the morning, you're going to do it in the evening, non-negotiable. It's there. And then being avid networkers, they're exactly what you were saying. They're going out and they're building relationships up and down the org chart with people who influence, people who are friends of friends, whoever they can. They're just building relationships, not so that they can sell, but really looking for, how do you build connections between people? So, if I can make an introduction to somebody else at our firm, or I could make an introduction to somebody else that's that they need a service of, and you're just there so that whenever they have a question about something, you're the first person that comes to mind. That really sets you up in a great position. And then I would say one piece that I've seen people who win do is being able to actually start conversations with people. And I find that's a piece that tends to be really hard. Like if you don't go to events and you're in between events, that's the place where people know how to start conversations and you get better at it. But when you don't go to an event, how do you actually get in front of and talk with your ideal customers? That's where I see people really struggle, and the best people are good at doing that.
Yeah, I see there's one more element. I agree with everything you just said. There's one more element too. you have to teach them how, because if I don't know how, I'm not going to be able to do it. So we have to have a plan. We have to make sure that people are putting time on their calendar to do that. That's the direction part of it. They have to know how. You can say, do it, and they're going to go to one of these events, or they're going to go to an ecosystem, and they're going to sit in their corner, or they're going to ask stupid questions. They're going to be ineffective, and they're not going to want to do it anymore. So we have to teach them how to do that. The other piece that I would add on to what you said is there's got to be an accountability for it. And if we say, everybody put it on your calendar, and I've taught you how to do that, but then you come to the meeting and you go, yeah, I didn't do any of it. You go, well, I know you were busy and you had some billable work, so that's cool. That doesn't fly. It's yes, there's going to be exceptions, but there has to be keep score, hold each other accountable. If there's no accountability, all of this stuff goes out the window. And if Joseph, you say, I put it on my calendar and I followed the process and it worked and I got an opportunity, you celebrate the heck out of that. And you go, awesome. Tell us all about it. What did you do? How did that work? And now you get to, go on about yourself and how awesome you were. And that's a reward in and of itself. But there's got to be an accountability. Otherwise, you can have the best laid plans and processes and everything else. And if nobody holds you to doing it, then why even do it in the first place?
I have a really practical follow-up to that. And Mike, it looks like you're going to have something to say too. But when we're talking about professional services, I think what scares people about sales, and when you say that, I think the immediate reaction to me is like, how do you keep it then from getting into the kind of like bro sales culture that all of the professional services people are pushing against? So like you want competition, and you want friendly competition, and you want to build accountability. And I agree with you that that's extremely important. But where's the line between that and then getting into like, Wolf of Wall Street, kind of like, the guys that
are, don't want that. Yeah. Don't,
how do you
don't
avoid
want that.
that?
There's a few ways. One, it can be done one-on-one. So somebody should own the accountability here. Somebody on your chart in your organization should own that. Now, do I have to get in a meeting and go, awesome job, Joseph, Mike, you didn't do anything, what up? No, that's going to create bad things. And that usually doesn't go in these professional sales organizations. But if I own it and I go, Mike, let's have our one-on-one. How did the BD stuff go this week? Oh, I didn't get to it. Oh, that's too bad. Tell me about why. And we have a constructive conversation and what's getting in the way and how do we help that? That's good. By the way, accountability people associate with negative consequences. No, accountability is good stuff. If we come to a team meeting and we went, Mike rocked this week, Joseph rocked this week, and I don't talk about the rest, Mike and Joseph talk about how you did and everything else, I'm just celebrating the good stuff. Does that get through to the people who didn't do good? 100% it does. Or if I want to put up a scoreboard, I just put up who is the top person this week. Am I making everybody else look bad? No, I'm celebrating who did well. So positive consequences are really good, and doing it one-on-one is really good. And if that conversation is, what's getting in the way? Let's practice some things. What can we do differently? Can I help you? And now I'm being constructive, and it's not I love it, the bro culture. It's not the Wolf of Wall Street. It's a positive. How do we get better? We got to do it. So let's figure out how we do it better.
Do you, part of this, I think, gets into the incentives conversation we were having earlier. I know I've talked to a number of consulting firms where they go, no, we don't do incentives. Like there's no quota, there's no, whatever. On the flip side, I've seen it where they do, like they're carrying a specific revenue number that they're net new revenue number they're each trying to hit and things like that. What have you seen be successful from that perspective, from an incentives perspective? For these
most professional services organizations push back around the concept of quotas and commissions and things along those lines. If it ain't your culture, it ain't your culture. So if it is, cool. If you're responsible for a number, tie compensation to it. Compensation is not the number one driver of things, though. I would say you break it down either weekly or monthly and say to some leading indicator, how many networking meetings are you going to get? How many new opportunities are you going to create? And somebody holds you to that. And we sit down every week. Mike, you and I sit Monday morning and go, you had a goal of 1. How did we do? I got 2. Rock on, Mike. I didn't get any. Oh, what got in the way? Let's talk about it. What do you got to do differently this week? And we have a constructive conversation. you can drive behavior just as much by having that one-on-one as with any comp plan. And if you're consistent with it and it's positive and constructive, and you can drive a lot of behavior just that way.
Yep.
More coaching,
Yeah,
like think of it as almost like being a sales coach, where you're there to try to help the other person be better at selling versus trying to beat them over the head and
Right.
make them feel bad and, make them feel like they're going to get fired if they, if they didn't meet their number this week or whatever. It's like, they know they're going to come to that meeting and leave with tools to actually do their job better.
Right. How are you being held? Yeah. I know that sports and sales get over too many analogies for those two types of things. But the one I like that nobody talks about is, in most sports, you get a limited number of timeouts, and you got to be really judicious with how you use those timeouts and when and everything else. This is the real world, man. You can have as many timeouts as you want. At any given time, you can go, hey, Joseph, let's talk about what's going on here. Seems like you're struggling in this area. What do we got to do different? You take as many timeouts as you need to be constructive and to be positive. But as soon as you get in professionals, take a CPA and you go, you didn't hit your number of meetings this week. Holy crap, that person's probably quitting next week, because it's just not the culture.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, we've definitely seen it in a similar way. We do a lot of activation work around LinkedIn in particular. And, it's same kind of thing. It's, well, hey, here's your homework assignment. We want everybody to send, two introduction, two connection requests and post 2 comments and whatever, and let's come back and report, and we'll see how it went. And I mean, the number of times that people go, I didn't have time, or things like that. It's like, okay, well, why not? What prevented you from doing it? We talk through in exactly the same way as you described, because it's just like any other activity.
Yep. And you're shaping adult behavior.
Yep.
Adults don't want to change their behavior. I mean, it takes time and encouragement and coaching and positivity to get people to do something differently.
Yep, definitely. Well, we're right on time here, Joseph.
I love it. We could probably keep having this conversation for another hour or two. It's pretty. You shared some really great stuff today, Gary. Really, really appreciate you coming on with us.
Love it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Maybe one last thing to mention, Joseph, is since we just talked about LinkedIn activation, we've got our social selling accelerator cohorts running. I think the next one starts in, do we have a date?
It's going to be early March. I don't have the exact date yet, but if you're interested in learning how to apply some of these things, how to start conversations with people in between events, then you should check out the Social Selling Accelerator. You can hit me or Mike up on LinkedIn and we can send you the details for that.
Yep. And then definitely check out the Outbound podcast, because we got that interview with Matt Dixon that went out, and there's a few other good ones in there as well. So, all right, Gary, this is fun. Thank you. And everybody else, thanks for joining, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks.
All right. Thanks for having me, guys.